Quite a bit has transpired since the initial closing of the ICook Foods doors. From the first inquiry in August 2020, where they found issues with the process and shortcomings in how ICook Foods was dealt with by the food safety regulators, and now a second inquiry was opened and the committee held 3 hearings in August and September of 2020 and have now made 14 findings and 5 recommendations in a second report. And the government has been given 6 months to respond. Today we welcome back Ian Cook, the owner, and Rod Porter, who's one of the police detectives assisting him. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
G'day, Mike. How are you?
Now, Ian, how do you feel the report has accurately or inaccurately portrayed the events that happened?
I think it's pretty telling that what's his name, Professor Sutton, was forced to admit that he misled the inquiry. Now, the conclusions they've come to raise more questions than answers. They point out that they don't see themselves as skilled enough as investigators, so it should go to Victoria Police and or IBAC. So I think we need to wait and see. And that also then brings into question what's happened since then with Victoria Police. But in terms of the report itself, yeah, it's clear what was done. It's clear that they were misleading the Parliament, but it's been voted down party lines, and so you've got the report you've got, which sort of says, oh yes, they did mislead, but it was just confusion. It wasn't any wrongdoing. Well, I think most of the public will see through that and see that it just doesn't pass the pub test.
Now, Fiona Patten actually gave the statement that the fresh evidence contradicts witness testimony provided by senior officials in the Victorian Government and the City of Greater Dandenong at the previous hearings, but she alleges that it was by omission that caused great confusion rather than any underhanded or deceitful plot. How does that sit with you, Rod, as a former policeman?
I think it's as clear as the nose on your face that the deceit throughout this is just enormous. No, I do not agree with it was caused by omissions. There's clear evidence there and they just simply don't act upon it.
Victoria Police has also reopened a probe into corruption concerns with the conduct of the officials from Dandenong Council and Department of Health that were involved in this. Where does that go, and do you have any input with that, Ian? Have you been spoken to?
Okay, I've been spoken to a couple of times. Just I'll fill you in without going into a long-winded story about it. Let me fill you in. The police have opened this investigation again, and only because they were embarrassed and forced to. There has now been further political interference. I have serving detectives, numerous serving detectives who've told me that it was shut down and it would be shut down again, and they'll find any excuse not to pursue it. Now, we've also been told a few things. One, a very senior police person out here in the city of Dandenong, stationed out here, is having an affair with a councillor from the city of Dandenong, and this has been corroborated by numerous sources. Unfortunately, those officers don't want to be named. As they said, they would lose their jobs, but it's quite clear there is a reason and reasons to protect the city of Dandenong and its and the people around that. And the cover-up is extraordinary. As a person who made a complaint nearly 2 years ago now, to find it handballed around, to find this level of closeness between Dandenong and the council, I think that's Dandenong Police Station and the police there and the council, is just extraordinary.
Now, Rod, how long did you have in the force?
I had 26 years in the force, and most of that time was as a detective.
Now, in that 26 years, if you were aware of exculpatory or evidence that proved contrary to where you were going, would you have put that forward? This isn't normal practice, is it, surely?
No, it's not. It's quite extraordinary. I've never seen behaviour like this in all my time as a police officer. It's very disappointing for me to sit here and have to say this, but it looks to me that Victoria Police have been compromised.
And the politicisation of the police is becoming more and more apparent, and the separation of powers really seems to be a problem for Victoria Police and the Andrews government at the moment. Wouldn't you agree, Rod?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, they're the pillars of our society that we rely on for justice, and the lines are well and truly blurred now. It's just shocking. That's all I can say. It's just astounding.
Now, back to you, Ian. Seeing as the inquiry have said that the tampering with evidence is beyond the remit of the inquiry, how can you have any faith or confidence in Victoria Police's ability to actually check and hold themselves to account? This seems like the fox guarding the chicken.
Yes, that's exactly right. And in actual fact, while you have John Benny and Leanne Johnson, the Coordinator of Public Health at Dandenong City Council, both of them admitted to the inquiry that they edited, which is tampering with evidence that was used in a criminal prosecution against myself and my company. So first of all, they've admitted it. Now, when I took that up with the detective who's supposedly re-looking at the evidence, he said, "Oh yes, but I can't use that because they've got parliamentary privilege." Well, Rod will have a different view on that, as did Paul Brady, the other detective that's been helping us. But cop this, we have the metadata. We have the metadata on those body cameras that showed, and it takes a computer expert to get deep into that, if I can put it that way, but they've done that, they've come up with it, and they can show that footage, when it was edited, the password that was used was Elizabeth Garlick's, that's the lady that dropped the slug in our premises, and it's her username, her password. And I said, we can prove exactly who tampered with that evidence, and still Victoria Police are doing nothing.
Now, out of the 14 findings and the 5 recommendations, Ian, is there anything of any consequence there that you're actually happy with, that you can see some meaningful movement?
Look, the committee were effectively forced to reopen it when when the Ray Christie report became apparent. So that was that. And having been forced to reopen it, there were a few people that took it seriously. Anybody who watched it saw that Georgie Crozier, Matthew Bark, a couple of them, they were making good, thorough interrogatory sort of questions, but they kept being shut down. It was clear from the outset that this was going to be another cover-up. It's no different to the inquiry, the Coate inquiry into what medical advice was given to set up hotel quarantine. People didn't read emails, or they forgot, or they couldn't remember. And then in Sutton's case, when he was finally cornered and pushed into a corner, he said, "Oh yeah, I meant to tell you that. I forgot that. I didn't mean it." But what was it that he didn't mean to do? He didn't mean to forget to tell the committee the first time that ICook Foods was only one of 6 suppliers into that hospital. And yet in that, every time he said, no, it was the sole supplier. That made us look as guilty as sin to anybody listening to it. And no, it wasn't true. No, it was quite wrong.
Now, that's obviously the omission that Fiona Patten was referring to that caused the confusion.
Yes, that's correct. The whole exercise it got more information out, but it just showed once again, this government was going into cover-up mode. I mean, there are serious crimes here, and there are very serious issues for all Victorians out of this. You know, ICook Foods is the small story telling a much, much larger story of cover-up and corruption and the lack of process and the lack of separation of powers occurring in Victoria today. And that has to be front and centre of any clear-thinking Victorian's mind. This is not the way that democracy is supposed to run. And
Andrews and his government paint themselves as the patron saint of the workers, and yet there are 40 members, family members, workers that have been put out of business through ICook Foods through this, aren't there, Ian?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. Yeah. They most of what we see from these people is a facade. It's a facade, and they just say whatever suits on the day, and particularly Daniel Andrews. As when somebody else described, he's just like a bull in a china shop. He doesn't care about the separation of powers. He doesn't care about the Westminster system. All he cares about is his group, his cronies, and his power base.
Now, Rod, with your 26 years of experience as a detective, we always look for the motive, and people normally dismiss it. Well, he wouldn't do that. Why would he do it? What do you think the motivation for this actually was?
Well, the motivation quite clearly is that ICook Foods were leaders in their field, in the industry they're in, and the federal and state government, along with a number of councils, funded a competitor called Community Chef. Millions of taxpayers' dollars were put into establishing Community Chef, and up until today it has not turned over a profit of any kind. And we're supporting that company, you, I, every other taxpayer in the state. We're supporting it, Doug. So, in fact, the regulator became a commercial competitor, and they wanted ICook out of the equation to try and improve their own standing and profitability.
Yeah, and it's a fairly common motive, isn't it? Follow the money is what we say in journalism, and it leads straight to that. Now, speaking of the money, Ian, are we any closer to finding out where that $800,000 went?
No, well, John Benny was asked that in the committee hearings, and now remember, John Benny was a director of Community Chef, and yet he could not tell the committee where that money went when he was asked the question. It appears to have disappeared. But can I tell you also, I think I said this to you last time, at that hearing, Cicerone, who's the CEO of Community Chef, he said that they were given $757,000 by the department. That he didn't say what for. He just says that's what they got. Now remember, he has to put this in as a report afterwards. He doesn't say anything at the actual hearing. He's just forced to, get this right. This is the first hearing, and he had to put in a supplementary report, and that's where this 700,757 turns up. Now, when he puts that report in, and when he was talking to the committee, at that time, Community Chef was given $3.3 million by the Department of Health, and that shows up in their accounts. Now, all of that money has just disappeared. So he was actually lying to them about what he got too, because when he spoke to them, he knew. He was the CEO. How could he not know?
Now, Ian, you're assembling quite the A-team there with Big Gun coming on board, with Robert Richter now joining the team to fight it. Where to from here? Are we going to be able to clear up the omissions and confusions, or the deceptions and lies, depending on which side of the ledger you stand on?
So yes, look, we're very pleased to have Robert Richter as part of the team now. In fact, he'll be leading the team. The important thing to remember here is that Robert Richter QC is famous for good reason. He's one of the best cross-examiners on the Victorian bar, if not in Australia, and is well renowned for that. Now, we're suing for misfeasance, which is wrongdoing in public office. And a lot of the things that these people have done were actually criminal acts and civil torts, as they say. To have someone who specialises in criminal cross-examination, cross-examining these people is paramount. Now, we also have Dr. Michelle Sharp, quite a renowned barrister in her own right. She's got a PhD in law. She knows administrative law, so the other side of what we're doing very well. So we now have, apart from the lawyers backing them up and the IT specialists and everyone else that's getting the information through and collating it, we are firing on all fours, and we intend taking the fight up to them so that people are held to account, even if it is only in the civil courts.
All right, well, thanks so much for your time, Rod and Ian. Really appreciate it. Please keep us informed and we'll talk soon.
We will.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.